In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to solve quadratic equations by finding square roots. There are 4 ways we're going to find the solution to quadratic equations. Solutions are just the X-intercepts. So our first way is going to be by finding square roots. Then we're going to do it by factoring. Then we're going to do it by completing the square. And lastly, we're going to use the quadratic formula. But this video focuses on just using the square root method. So here we go. First example. We want to solve this equation for the roots or the zeros or the x-intercepts. All 3 of these words, so roots, zeros, x-intercepts, all mean the same thing. So we're just solving the equation for x. So we're going to do what we do normally, the inverse operations. So take the square root of both sides. X is equal to, remember this sign is important when you're doing any of these, positive and negative 11. So it's 2 answers for this problem. So x equals positive 11 and x equals negative 11. These are both solutions to this quadratic equation. Alright, let's try another one. Okay, we got 3x squared equals 108. So we're going to follow our same principles we use when solving equations. First thing I'm going to do is divide by 3 on both sides. So we're going to do 108 divided by 3. And that tells us x squared is going to equal 36. Square root both sides. X equals, remember, positive, negative 6. So the solutions or the roots, the zeros, the x-intercepts are at x equal positive 6 and x equal negative 6. Okay, next one. Here you got 2x squared plus 5 equals 41. Still solving like normal. We're going to subtract 5, both sides of our equation. So I have 2x squared equals 36. Okay. I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides of the equation. So right now I have x squared equals 18. Take the square root, take the square root. This time we don't have a perfect square. So remember, we have to simplify the radical. So right now I have x equals plus or minus the square root of 18. But that can be simplified. So we have to go back to those things we learned previously. So I break down 18, 9 and 2, 3 and 3. Pair of 3's, 1, 2. So my final answer is x equals plus or minus 3 square root 2, which is the same thing as x equals positive 3 root 2 and x equals negative 3 root 2. Let's go to our next one. Same field, taking square root. So the first step I'm going to do on this one is take the square root over here. So I end up with x plus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 7. Okay. Subtract 5 on both sides. So x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 7. This is generally the standard form that you would write this in. We use the radical, we put it in the back, and the number that is not a radical goes in the front. So always when you're writing these, make sure the radical's in the back with the plus or minus and the other numbers in the front. That's not a radical. So if we separate this out, our answer would be x equals negative 5 plus the square root of 7, and x equals negative 5 minus the square root of 7. And remember, 2 answers, plus minus. I keep harping on it, but you have to remember you should have 2 answers for the most part when you're doing these quadratics. Okay? 2 roots, 2 zeros. You can have 1 root, but we'll talk about some of those later. Okay. Next example. All right. I want to solve this one for x. So I have this 1/3. Remember, we can multiply by the reciprocal, which is 3/1 on both sides. So I have x minus 4 squared equals 21. Okay. Square root both sides. Square root both sides. So I find out I have x minus 4 equals positive negative square root 21. Add 4, add 4. So x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 21. Okay. So fine, if we split that up, it's going to be x equals 4 plus the square root of 21. And x equals 4 minus the square root of 21. Okay. Last example. This one has a little more to it, but we handle it the same way. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 45 to both sides. So I have 2a minus 6 quantity squared equals 98. Then I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides. So we do 98 divided by 2. That gives us 49. So I have a minus 6 quantity squared equals 49. Square root, square root. So I have a minus 6 equals positive negative 7, because that one's a perfect square. So I add 6, add 6. So I have a equals 6 plus or minus 7. So that's really a equals 6 plus 7, which is 13. So that's one of the answers. Then a equals 6 minus 7, which is going to be negative 1. So that's my other answer here. Okay. So a equals 13, a equals negative 1. So those would be my intercepts, the solutions to my equation, to the equation. So that's all with taking square roots to solve quadratic equations. Let me know if you have any questions. Leave comments below.